In the intricate world of global economics, a single policy decision can trigger a tidal wave of consequences, affecting markets and economies worldwide. This week, that wave hit hard, sending ripples through financial markets and boardrooms alike. Trump's signature tariffs, a cornerstone of his America First agenda, have just suffered their most significant legal defeat to date, challenging the very foundation of his trade policies. The ruling sent shockwaves from the political heart of Washington to the boardrooms of the world's largest corporations, forcing a re-evaluation of strategies. At the center of this unfolding drama is Apple CEO Tim Cook, a pivotal figure in the tech industry. His response? Swift, decisive, and potentially transformative for the global tech landscape, signaling a shift in how tech giants operate. The story begins not in a courtroom, but in Asia's sprawling factories, the beating heart of the global tech supply chain. For years, Apple and other tech giants thrived on global cooperation, sourcing parts from around the world and assembling primarily in China, a strategy that fueled their growth. Trump's tariffs disrupted this delicate balance, aiming to protect U.S. jobs, but inadvertently sparking a costly trade war that affected global markets. Now, the U.S. Court of International Trade has invalidated key tariffs, upending years of strategic planning and economic assumptions. For leaders like Cook, it's both a vindication of their cautious strategies and a call to action to adapt to the new landscape. Cook has spent years quietly recalibrating Apple's supply chain, preparing for a future less reliant on any single nation. Now, with the legal ground shifting beneath their feet, he's accelerating a bold new strategy that could redefine the industry. The era of relying on a single manufacturing superpower is ending, ushering in a new age of diversified production. The great decoupling is no longer a theoretical concept, it's happening now, reshaping the global economic landscape. The world is watching closely as Apple leads a dramatic recalibration of global power dynamics, setting a precedent for others to follow. To truly grasp this pivotal moment in recent history, we must revisit the origins of Trump's tariffs and the motivations behind them. In 2018, the Trump administration imposed sweeping tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, citing what it called unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, and a growing trade deficit that many believed threatened American industry. Suddenly, billions in imports faced taxes as high as 25%, marking a sharp and dramatic break from decades of free trade policies that had defined U.S. economic strategy since the late 20th century. The stated goal was clear: level the playing field for American workers and revive domestic manufacturing that had been hollowed out by years of offshoring. The reality, however, was a trade war that quickly escalated, touching nearly every sector of the American economy, from agriculture to technology, retail to manufacturing. Proponents of the tariffs pointed to early wins for U.S. manufacturing, with some factories reporting increased orders and new jobs. But critics, including many economists and business leaders, warned of higher costs, supply chain disruptions, and a ripple effect that would be felt around the globe. Studies soon showed that U.S. importers and ultimately American consumers bore nearly all the costs, not China, as prices on everyday goods began to rise. Businesses faced a tough choice: absorb the higher costs and risk shrinking profits, or raise prices and risk losing customers. China retaliated swiftly, targeting U.S. exports like soybeans and cars, devastating American farmers and manufacturers who depended on access to Chinese markets. As agricultural exports to China plummeted, the U.S. government was forced to step in, providing billions in emergency aid to struggling farmers. The tit-for-tat escalation created deep uncertainty for businesses and investors, setting the stage for a wave of legal challenges and lawsuits. The tariffs' broad reach and economic fallout made them one of the most controversial and hotly debated trade policies in decades, sparking protests and fierce political debate. The casualties of the trade war mounted on both sides of the Pacific, with closed factories, lost jobs, and deserted main streets in towns that once thrived on global commerce. The legal battle that followed would not only test the limits of presidential power, but also reshape the future of global trade for years to come. The stakes were enormous, not just for the U.S. economy, but for the very model of globalization that had defined the modern world. As uncertainty spread, the world braced for the next move in a conflict that would reverberate far beyond tariffs and trade. The legal fight over tariffs reached a climax this month. Thousands of U.S. importers argued the Trump administration overstepped its authority, expanding tariffs without proper justification. On October 3, 2025, the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled decisively for the importers. The court found the administration failed to consider the economic harm and ignored required procedures. This invalidated tariffs on $320 billion in goods, creating legal and economic limbo. Companies may now claim billions in refunds, but appeals could drag on for years. The ruling is a blow to protectionism and a win for rules-based trade. For corporate America, it's a watershed moment, potentially a financial windfall and a signal to rethink global strategy. Yet, leaders like Tim Cook know the risks remain. The trade war exposed the dangers of concentrated supply chains. The court's decision is a catalyst, not a conclusion. The next phase of global manufacturing is already underway. Just hours after the court's decision sent shockwaves through the tech world, Tim Cook sprang into action, demonstrating Apple's trademark decisiveness in the face of uncertainty. Apple quickly announced a staggering $50 billion investment aimed at accelerating the diversification of its global supply chain and reducing risk. The message was clear: Apple is moving swiftly to reduce its long-standing dependence on China, a move that signals a new era for the company. While Apple has been exploring alternatives for years, the scale and urgency of this shift are truly unprecedented in the company's history. Cook, known for his mastery of quiet diplomacy, has consistently argued that tariffs ultimately hurt U.S. consumers and stifle innovation. Apple began shifting some assembly to India and Vietnam years ago, but now the pace has accelerated dramatically, with new facilities coming online at record speed. Back in 2019, a staggering 95% of iPhones were manufactured in China, highlighting the company's deep reliance on a single country. By 2025, that figure is projected to drop to under 80%, reflecting Apple's rapid progress in diversifying its manufacturing base. The new long-term goal is ambitious. Apple aims to bring that number below 60% by 2030, fundamentally reshaping its global footprint. These massive investments are targeting new, state-of-the-art factories in India, Vietnam, and beyond, with a strong focus on advanced automation and next-generation manufacturing technologies. It's a massive overhaul. Apple is essentially rebuilding its entire operational foundation, all while keeping its global business running at full speed. Cook's bold move leverages ongoing policy uncertainty, using it as a catalyst to justify and accelerate this strategic pivot. Apple now positions itself as a pragmatic leader, taking proactive steps to secure its future against unpredictable geopolitical shocks and market disruptions. The key lesson for the entire industry: resilience now trumps just-in-time efficiency as companies adapt to a more volatile world. Apple isn't just moving factories, it's re-architecting the global tech supply chain, setting a new standard for how multinational companies respond to global challenges. Apple's new supply chain story centers on India and Vietnam. In India, partners like Foxconn are building massive new iPhone campuses, fueled by government incentives. Production there now includes the latest models for both local and export markets. Vietnam has become the hub for AirPods, iPads, and MacBooks, thanks to its proximity to China's component suppliers. Apple's investment is upgrading Vietnam's logistics and workforce, driving double-digit export growth. But replicating China's scale and skill is daunting. India and Vietnam face infrastructure and labor challenges. Apple's strategy isn't to abandon China, but to create a balanced, resilient network. China remains vital, but now it's part of a multi-country system. The goal: flexibility and redundancy, not just cost and efficiency. This is the new reality of global manufacturing. Apple's bold move is reshaping the tech industry. As the sector's bellwether, Apple's $50 billion commitment forces rivals to rethink their own supply chains. The China Plus One strategy is now a competitive necessity. Markets have responded. Companies with diversified production are rewarded, while those tied to China face volatility. Investors now value resilience as much as profits. Countries worldwide are racing to attract high-tech manufacturing, offering incentives and infrastructure upgrades. Southeast Asia and Latin America are emerging as new hubs, but diversification is costly. Building new factories and training workers takes time and money. These costs will likely reach consumers, ending the era of ever-cheaper electronics. The new paradigm: stability over rock-bottom prices. The trade-off is higher costs now for a more secure tech future. Apple's supply chain reveals the fragility of the global economy. Hundreds of suppliers, once optimized for efficiency in China, now face new risks. The trade war and pandemic exposed how a single disruption can halt production and cost billions. Tariffs alone cost U.S. tech firms over $15 billion annually. Apple's lobbying won some exemptions, but many costs were absorbed or passed on. The uncertainty stifled investment and innovation across the industry. Apple's diversification offers suppliers a clear path forward. Invest in new hubs, and Apple will follow. This helps coordinate a massive industry shift, but the transition is risky and complex. Moving production to new countries is a multi-year, high-stress process. The supply chain will remain under pressure as the new system takes shape. Ultimately, these global shifts hit home for American consumers. The trade war, meant to protect U.S. interests, raised prices for many tech products. Apple shielded customers from major hikes, but smaller brands couldn't. Diversifying supply chains is expensive. Costs that may be passed to consumers. The iPhone made in India could cost more than one from China. The question, will consumers pay more for resilient, secure supply chains? The pandemic's shortages may have changed perceptions. The coming years will test if resilience is worth the price. The past week marks a turning point. The era of relentless globalization is over. Resilience and risk management are the new priorities. Manufacturing reliance on China will shrink, but not disappear. New industrial hubs will rise, creating opportunities and complexity. Consumers will likely pay more for technology as costs shift. CEOs must now master geopolitics and logistics, not just finance. Tim Cook's playbook, quiet diplomacy and bold action, will be studied for years. The new model of leadership is about securing the future, not just inventing it. As corporations shape global policy, the balance of power is shifting. The question remains, who truly sets the agenda for our global future?